Let's go Atlanta Falcons at the Detroit Lions. The 2-0 Atlanta Falcons going to Detroit. Lions coming off a disappointing overtime loss against the Seattle Seahawks. The Falcons just held on tight against the Green Bay Packers last week to move to 2-0. It's a fun matchup, man. It's a battle of the two teams that drafted first-round running backs. We got Bijan Robinson versus Jahmyr Gibbs. Probably see a lot more of Jahmyr Gibbs from the Detroit Lions with David Montgomery's injury. What's the spread here? 3 points for the Lions, favored by 3 at home. What are you looking for in this one?
Yeah, the Jahmyr Gibbs thing is going to be interesting. I mean, they now have an opportunity to scale up his workload a bit, albeit in a different role that I don't think they really envisaged for him with David Montgomery hurt. So, I mean, look, it's 2 weeks. It's a bit early to be taking victory laps on anything, but after 2 weeks, my suggestion that talking up a player's like unique role in an offense, he's going to be offensive weapon trademark, not, receiver or running back. It always sounds better than it ends up being, right? And Jahmyr Gibbs right now, he had 9 targets and ended up with 39 yards last week. It's useless. That's not doing you any good as an offense. That's not an offensive weapon or a playmaker. That's just the dump off consistently. And as a runner, he didn't really go anywhere either. And now, look, I think he's a talented player. I just think when you try and overcomplicate this, it doesn't work. Whereas the Falcons are generally just using Bijan Robinson as a running back, and it turns out he's amazing at that, so it's working way better. Just another week of seeing what they're going to try and do with Jahmyr Gibbs, given how relatively underwhelming his deployment and his efficiency has been in the first 2 weeks.
At the same time, I would be more concerned if they were trying to force 25 touches Jahmyr Gibbs' way every single week. And that goes back. That's the whole why draft a running back that high. If you have to justify it by forcing touches, then you're taking away, if you're Detroit, you're taking away a couple deep shots from Khalif Raymond, which seemed to work as they did last week.
Right.
You're taking away Amon-Ra St. Brown. You're taking away even Josh Reynolds, right? Josh Reynolds, the mid-tier receiver, is going to create more big plays than Jahmyr Gibbs over time because he's a receiver. So you don't want to just force the running back. I'm waiting for the game where Gibbs does go off because that's how the matchups dictate things, right? They have a great matchup against a linebacker and he catches 8 passes for 90 yards or whatever it might be. What I'm curious about is I don't think they trust him in David Montgomery's role.
Yeah,
right. They have used him in completely. I tweeted out the run concepts yesterday. They're not going to use him between the tackles. So they might, but they don't seem to trust him yet. They're getting him out wide on those pin and pull sweep type of concepts, which are great, but that can't be the only way that Gibbs runs the ball. So that's what I'm interested in. Do they keep him as we just want to get him in space type of player, or does he become a 15 to 18 carry type of guy because those carries are available? Because I don't know if that's Gibbs' strength. I like getting him in space 8 to 12 times a game and see if he could break one. So I'm not sure if he's actually going to replace David Montgomery here this week.
That's what I think is a mistake in terms of deployment. Like, you have a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs who skews towards that sort of in-space type of player, running back receiver hybrid. But the reason he skews towards that is because he's fast as hell, athletic and explosive. Now, athletic, explosive, and fast plays between the tackles as well, because it means if you get through the line, you can be gone. And, okay, you might have less chance of making it through the line than a dude who's a stocky power back that can break a tackle, an arm tackle from a defensive lineman at the line to get through to the second level. But I'm not 100% sure that that's true. Like, this was the fallacy with Tony Pollard and Zeke Elliott for years, right? And yet on the same run concepts, inside zone, power, Tony Pollard was making more bigger plays because of his explosion and his burst and his acceleration straight through the line. Like, there's data now to say that the most important thing for running success is that explosive ability. So I actually think this idea of you don't want to take a sort of smaller speed back and run him up the middle, I don't know that that's true anymore. I don't know if it was ever true, but certainly that was the conventional wisdom for a long time. Now I think you actually want to use that guy like a running back because that's just how you're going to get him the most targets in the most normal way possible and maximize the fact that he's an explosive playmaker. Like, my appeal to the Detroit Lions at this point, 2 weeks into the season, is Like, stop trying to come up with fantastic creative ways to get Jahmyr Gibbs the ball in space. You just got a running back injured. Just start giving him those carries, and you might be surprised that he turns them into 150 rushing yards off like 3, explosive plays through the line. Just do that.
Detroit's depth absolutely being challenged on the defensive side of the ball. In particular, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, he's on injured reserve. James Houston on injured reserve. I think what looked like a really nice pass rush for Detroit coming into the season so far has been Aiden Hutchinson and friends. And what that looks like in games is the final play against Seattle, where Hutchinson gets pressure and Geno Smith sidesteps him and throws the game-winning touchdown. Aiden Hutchinson was getting pressure against Patrick Mahomes, who did not get sacked, and just kept sidestepping the one pressure and getting the throw off. If Detroit is not unable, and I don't know how much it shows up in this game, Desmond Ritter's been dropping back like 20, 25 times a game here. But if Detroit can't find a way to get pressure, I don't know if they should be looking to bring other people in.
Yeah.
Is Melvin Ingram still out there? Melvin Ingram could still come in and grab 5 pressures a game. But Detroit needs help up front. Aiden Hutchinson's playing well. He's playing fine. You're not going to feel it, though, if he's the only guy pushing the pocket. That's easier to avoid for a quarterback. I think that's a big issue for Detroit's defense right now, in addition to just injuries and being banged up on the back end.
And remember, that's kind of the story from last year as well. Like, that's why James Houston exists, because the other guys, the Aquaras, the people that were supposed to be getting pressure opposite Aiden Hutchinson weren't. And then they gave this guy James Houston a few snaps, and he turned that into a few pressures and some sacks, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, he's better already than anybody else we've got trying to get pressure. Let's scale up his workload. But the point being, the starting point was that failure of anybody else to generate pressure. These young guys that they hadn't actually showed up and been factors, and it's happening again. So I agree with you. I think that's a potential concern for that Lions defense.
Atlanta, I've been impressed, man. I think we talked about their additions this offseason, and so far so good for a bunch of them. Repeated again, David Onyemata playing well. Jesse Bates has had those big plays, especially in week 1. Caden Ellis, Calais Campbell, those guys are playing well. Falcons defense, it's very early, but lowest completion percentage allowed on 10-plus yard throws on the defensive side of the ball. Bijan Robinson looks like an absolute star and kind of similar to the Niners, but at a different level. You don't know which one of those freaky playmakers, a Drake London, a Kyle Pitts, a Bijan, is going to make the big play every single week. So Desmond Ritter's taking care of the ball. The formula is there, I think, for the Falcons. Makes this another really fun, intriguing game. I like the Lions at home. Jared Goff played really well last week outside of the 1 pick 6. And Goff plays well at home. They're still scheming it up really well offensively in Detroit. I want to see the Gibbs stuff, but I think the Detroit's firepower, I think, is gonna show up here. 3-point spread. Where are you going with this one? I'll take the Lions to cover it.
Yeah, it'll be a good test for that Atlanta defense, which is a lot better than it was a year ago. There's at least good players at all 3 levels, but it still might not have enough to combat a defense, or an offense rather, as good as Detroit can bring to the table. So I think this will be a fun game. I tend to lean into Detroit a little bit. I think they're just a little bit more proven and assured across the board than Atlanta, who are a fascinating team to watch and a fun side, but I don't know if they have enough against Detroit. So the Lions to win and cover.
Yeah, I think Detroit should match up a little bit better against Atlanta maybe than they did against Seattle, who came out chucking it, and they couldn't get any pressure on Geno Smith. So we'll take in the Lions to cover the 3.